Welcome to Writer, a program sponsored by the Florida Community College at Jacksonville. This is Gerri Turbo, and we're going to have the happy opportunity of speaking with Dr. Stuart Kaminsky. We're very happy to have you here today. Dr. Kaminsky is a novelist, a screenwriter, and a mystery series writer. And because you have such a wealth and varied subjects and such a proliferation of subjects, I'd like to read briefly for our viewers just some of the things that you do.
Go right ahead.
Dr. Kaminsky is an author of over 40 books and 20 short stories. Of those, 33, I believe, are novels. There are 9 biographies, and the other books contain film history and film making and script writing. The novels have been translated into 12 other languages. And one of those is a series which we'll probably touch on today, a murder series which stars Inspector Rosnikov. This, one of these novels won the Edgar Award, a very coveted award given by the Mystery Writers of America. So welcome to you, Dr. Kaminsky.
Thank you.
Again.
Stuart will be fine.
All right. If you will pardon my paraphrasing, you are really a writer for all seasons.
Thank you.
I was reading some of your reviews, and one that stays in my mind is a reviewer who said that you had the imagination of Scheherazade.
Yeah, that came early in my career from the, I can't remember whether it was the Washington Post or the New York Times.
It was the Washington Post.
And I like it particularly, and so does my publisher, because they use it on almost every book.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
I've been reading it, but it is certainly appropriate.
I like it, yes.
What triggers your imagination?
What need?
Need
Yes.
plus need.
But that's not the only reason. That's a simple reason. I've had a desire to write. If you ask me where it came from, I don't know. I've had this since I was a child. I have a need to write. I have a need to tell stories, not just to write. My background, even as an undergraduate, was in journalism. I wanted to be a writer for I don't know how long. I loved to tell stories. I loved to read stories from the time I was a child. I wasn't much good in other subject areas, but English, I was.
You were shining in that one.
That was my area. It still is, yes.
Well, where do your story ideas come from?
I have 2 answers to that question. It depends on who asks the question. If a writer or a would-be writer asks me that question, my response is almost immediately, you shouldn't be a writer. I mean, it's a good question for you to ask me. It's not a good question for a writer to ask, because my assumption is that they want to be writers because they have stories to tell. And that's really why one of the reasons I like to write. I have so many stories to tell, and then new stories come to me and new ideas. So when it's not a question of where I get my ideas, they come from all over the place, from newspapers, things that happen to me, people that I meet. I may read a book, fiction or nonfiction, which will trigger an idea. Magazines, they come sometimes from I don't know where, but they come. They are simply there. And for most writers I know, the same, who are reasonably successful, the same thing is true. They never sit there and wonder, where's my next story coming from? So it's how can I get all the stories told that I want to tell. Do you always have one in the wings then, waiting to go? Since I do 4 novels a year approximately, and I try to do 2, 3 short stories a year, I would say normally what I have to do is have a treatment or a synopsis of the story, which the publisher approves. That's a formality because they almost always do. There might be a minor change. So I have to at least think of that while I'm writing a different book. I think of that, and then somewhere working within my semi or unconscious is the next work I'm going to be doing. I don't think about it too consciously. And in fact, it even happens occasionally that I'll write an outline for a book and finish the book I'm writing and turn back to the outline and not remember the outline at all. It's like something new, and I'd say, that's a nice story, but that's not the thing I'm going to write now.
Well, that was one of my questions too. When you work, do you provide yourself with an outline, and do you follow it?
I like that question. I do have an outline. Basically, I read it before I start writing the book. I put it aside, and I write. I mean, I will have thought about it again. The story will go where it is supposed to go. And if it starts veering in another direction, that's all right too. If I like where it's going, that's all right too, because I still have a fairly good idea where it's going to end. What I will do with my outlines is, as I get further and further in the book, I'll go back to the outline and I'll revise the outline. So the final outline doesn't bear much resemblance to the original, as my publishers have occasionally pointed out too.
Well, that's good.
They don't mind the book that I give them. They like the book that I've given. I've never had a single problem with that. But once in a while, one of them will say, well, this isn't the book we agreed upon. I like it, but it's not the one we agreed upon. And I say, but I told you that's the way I work. So.
But do you end up with the same ending, more or less?
More or less, yeah, I do.
You don't vary that much, then?
I don't vary that much in terms, since I write mysteries primarily. It doesn't vary too much in terms of who did what to whom. Now, all of my mysteries or thrillers are not whodunits. There's not, I mean, the book that I'm just finishing, there's no whodunit aspect to any of it. It's a police procedural story, and you know who commits each of the crimes. It's the question is really, how does it resolve itself? What happens to the people? What happens to the policemen and their families? What happens to the criminals?
And how do they discover it?
Yeah, and that's pretty much in my mind when I start the book. I always count on something happening when I get toward the end that'll be a little bit of a twist. You know, a little for me too. A little surprise for me too. And I'm on a book now. I'm finishing. I'll finish the first draft of the book when I get home. And just in the last few days, I thought about what that will be for this book.
Do you take notes as you go along? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh, this is a great idea?
No, I go to bed thinking that I have great ideas, and I hope that I'll remember them in the morning. But during the day, I carry a notebook with me, and I do take notes.
You do take notes to keep your ideas.
Yeah, it gets a little, especially tough with the Russian books with all the Russian names and places, and I have to remember where everything is in Moscow, where they take place.
Well, that's
tough.
Well, this is exactly where I'm coming to now. I wanted to talk to you about your settings. They vary so in your mystery novels. I'm a mystery fan, and so I've enjoyed them thoroughly.
Thank you.
Tobey Peters is in L.A.
In the 40s.
In the 40s, and Detective Lieberman is in Chicago.
Present day.
And, oh, you're going to take him someplace else?
No, he's in the present. I'm not going to, I don't think so. I thought about taking him to Sarasota on vacation.
All right.
I don't know.
And Inspector Rosnikov is in Russia, and you even placed him in Siberia in one of your stories.
And in Yalta in another one, yes.
Well, in reading your bio, I noticed that you taught at the University of Chicago and
Northwestern University.
Northwestern and Illinois. Are you
No, I'm a graduate of Illinois. I'll put it together quickly for you. I have a journalism degree and an English literature degree from the University of Illinois, and I have a doctorate from Northwestern with a major in film and a minor in theater. I then taught at Northwestern University in the film and television department, headed that department, and started the creative writing program in media there. Then, after many years, I went to Florida State University, where I headed the graduate program, graduate conservatory in film studies, and filmmaking, actually.
Well, that answers my question about the settings in L.A. and Chicago, because you certainly know the environs in both of those places. But I wondered about Russia, because you give such a clear and definitive inside look at Rosnikov and the characters that you've created, what it meant to be a Russian citizen at that time. And I wondered how you had the marvelous imagination to create that.
Well, that time is this time, in that each story, each of the novels is set in the present. Whatever's going on in history affects the novels. And sometimes that worries me. You know, I'm afraid something massive is going to happen in the Soviet Union, which there was no Soviet Union anymore, and it did. And I had to completely rewrite one book because of that. I follow the events that are taking place in Russia fairly closely. I have friends who send me information. I collect books on Moscow particularly, but upon the environment there. The characters themselves are no problem. It's my feeling. I mean, I love Russian literature. I'm particularly fond of Gogol and Dostoevsky, after whom my character is named. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but it's true. My main character is Porfiry Petrovich Rosnikov, and the lawyer who traps Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment is Porfiry Petrovich. And my character has been named for that, that character. No, but to get back to your question, since I do remember your question, I believe that people, you really have, empathy is really essential to a writer. You have to put yourself in the other person's shoes, whether it's your central character or a small character, it doesn't matter. And if you know the environment, you know where they have to live and what they have to live with, your imagination takes over. And if your imagination is sufficient, the character's environment and reactions will be real for the reader. The reader will know. The reader will say, I can't imagine anybody under these circumstances behaving that way. When they don't even notice, then you know you've succeeded. Well, and so that's true of that, and I think it's true of my Tobey Peters books too, which are very, very different.
Well, I was going to get to your characters because I think Lieberman and Rosnikov are very much alike in some ways. They're both world-weary and they're middle-aged.
That's true.
And both very humane despite their professions. But then you come to Tobey Peters, who is brash and witty and cocky and totally different person.
Well, he's not even very bright, actually. He's not intended to be. He's persistent. I like your comparison of Lieberman and Rosnikov. I think you're right. Those characteristics are true. Lieberman's older than Rosnikov, and he's an American. They're familial. They both have familial problems. There's one big difference. I think the Lieberman books tend to be more of his tragedies. In fact, each book opens with a quote from a Greek tragedy, which it then, I hope, reflects on. Not that anybody's ever noticed that, but I hope it reflects on the tragedy. And Lieberman also Lieberman's Jewish and is very involved in the Jewish community, sometimes because he wants to be, sometimes because he's forced to be. And he's willing to take the law into his own hands if he thinks it's the right thing to do. Even though the laws, are reasonably clear. Rosnikov lives in an environment which I think sometimes comes right out of Kafka. I mean, you don't know what the law is, you don't know what the rules are, and it's a matter of sort of walking this thin rope for him. Now, that's not true for Lieberman. No. Lieberman knows, when I do this, I do it because I choose to do it. When Rosnikov does something, he has to think, what will happen? What does this mean? I don't know. And so he's constantly thinking on his, I was going to say feet, he's only got one leg, but he's thinking on his foot about what the consequences are to him, to his family, to his job. And throughout all of this, he maintains his integrity. Yes. And I think that's the thing I like about the character. In spite of living in an extremely corrupt environment, both under the Soviet Union and now under the non-communist regime, he manages to continue to hold on to his integrity. Yes. He never gives it up.
That may be the reason that he has stayed with me so long, for that very reason.
He's a good man.
He's a very good man, and you like him.
I like him. I like him too.
And your readers like him too. Yes. Then how important do you think personal experience is? Have you pictured your principal characters after people you know?
In the Lieberman series, the central character is someone I know. And my other characters are part me, part a lot of things. I can go through each one of them. Tobey Peters is a kind of echo of many of the hard-boiled private detectives. The primary difference with my Tobey Peters books, which are nostalgic books set in the 40s, is that he isn't, the chess playing, all wise person who's ready with a brilliant quip at all times. He's not particularly good with his fists. If he pulls his gun, be careful, because he's not very good with it at all. But he has one thing: he's got dogged determination. He will never give up. He has no money. He's got the strangest assortment of friends I could give him, but he's doggedly persistent. And as I say, he's an echo of these people. But he's not related to one in particular. Lieberman is directly taken from a film director here who I worked for named Don Siegel. The description of him is the same. His mannerisms are the same. Don died a number of years ago, and I worked for him, as I said. He is Don, and I wanted to bring Don back. It's the only time I've done that. Rosnikov, once again, is not anyone real, even though his name comes from Dostoevsky. If you look at the character descriptions, they're nothing alike. They're nothing, not even close. He's a character who has developed on his own. I've thought of what actor or actors I would like to portray him, and I do that kind of thing.
So you can visualize.
Yes, I cast all my books, so I know. I don't know what would happen if they were turned into films, but I know what they would look like. And usually it's usually actors.
So then you don't really have to experience to make your stories credible.
No, I'm at odds, I suppose, with some writers who I can be very friendly with, who say you must know what you are writing about. You must have the experience of what you are writing about. Well, actually, I agree with them, but you're the one who chooses what your experiences are. So if you don't know about this, you can read about it, you can think about it. If you have the imagination, you can use it. If it's necessary, you can go out and have that kind of experience. But I think if you have the imagination, if you are a storyteller, whether it is a storyteller in Greece several thousand years ago, or a storyteller today. In Florida, it hasn't changed. If you've got the story, you can, and you have a sense of the setting, you can create the character. The character will come alive.
Well, this brings me to another question then. I have heard writers say that often a principal, or even not a principal character, will take over in a novel and direct the plot in other ways. Have you ever experienced that?
This is a yes and no answer. One of the reasons that I probably experience it less than some other writers, not all other writers, is that I never think of my characters that way. I think of every character who appears in the book as being a living, breathing human being who will say and do what he or she wants to say and do, and I must be prepared for that. I don't want to force them to say what is not appropriate for them, and they often surprise me. So does it happen occasionally that a character will say more than I expect, do more than I expect? Yes, it occasionally happens. Usually, I think it happens for me for the better, and I go with it. But I don't think it happens as much for me as for other people because I'm willing to. I begin with the idea that I'm willing to accept this happening. I look forward to it happening. It's fine.
Well, that's good that you're open. I wanted to ask you something about the mystery novel today.
Sure.
It's become so very popular among readers, and why do you think this is happening?
I haven't the slightest idea, but I can say that mystery novels as a genre have been popular for, in the United States particularly, going back to the 1920s, at least to the 1920s. There have been a couple of lulls, but I think this is an ongoing genre, just as the romance has been an ongoing genre. People didn't notice it, but it was there, and people were reading it. It existed. So I think there was a lull about 12, 15 years ago, a slight lull in the mystery novel, and then a massive comeback to the point where mysteries and then romances and mysteries dominated the bestseller lists and continue to be very, very powerful in the market. You know the theories. People have given theories that it's perfect escapism. It reflects what's going on within our country or within the society. It's a microcosm. It's all of these things. I think those things are true. For me, I'm a storyteller. I want to tell a story. So when someone will come to me and say to me, I really liked that book. It really showed how, for example, how people from the Caribbean islands, particularly, black people from the Caribbean islands, are treated in the United States, how they have to live in a place like Chicago, what their plight is like, what they have to go through. Yeah, that's in the novel, but that's not why I wrote the novel. I wrote the novel because I thought of the characters. I had something
because you're interested in the people within the story.
Yeah, interested in the people. It came out. I've been told, your novels, your Russian novels are, fine depictions of what it means to have to live being Jewish in a state which basically is anti-Semitic.
Right.
The Soviet Union and now Russia, which is still to a great extent. Well, because some of my characters are Jewish. Rostnikov's not.
No.
But his wife is. Because some of my characters are, it does become an issue. But it's not an issue because I'm seeking an issue. I'm not trying to make an issue out of it.
No.
It's a story. And if I didn't feel that it was a good story I wanted to tell, it wouldn't be in there. Okay.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your Tobey Peters.
Sure.
Because that's so much fun.
Thank you.
And I'm interested in how you decided to devise using such principal people such as Bette Davis and Clark Gable as principal people who really direct the plot.
Yes, they're part of it. Sometimes very much a part of it. In my last Tobey Peters, my last published Tobey Peters, Dancing in the Dark, Fred Astaire is the client, and he's very much a part of it. Sometimes they're a little more passive in the plot. One of my books, Clark Gable, Clark Gable is a principal in the book. He's a little less involved in what's happening. So it really varies. But as much as I'd like to take credit for this whole concept, this concept goes back to the 1920s. It goes back to Alexander Dumas, in which Molière appears as a character in his novels. But back in the 20s, there was an occasional novel with real people in it. And as you may remember, a lot of viewers may remember, in the 30s and 40s, there's a very successful series of books by the Whitman Company, supposedly, but not really, written by famous stars who were detectives. So Ginger Rogers, Jane Withers, I don't remember there was a Judy Garland, Shirley Temple. I mean, these people who would be appeal particularly to younger readers appeared as fictional characters, occasionally having other famous movie stars or writers in their books.
Well,
and I read those, and I loved those.
And that was the germ, maybe, of the idea.
That was a start. The person I give the most credit to almost always is Andrew Bergman, who wrote 2 mysteries, detective stories set in the 1940s. Only wrote 2, and then he became a screenwriter and director. And those, I thought they were wonderful. And part of the reason I started Tobey Peters is because Andrew stopped writing his books.
Oh, I see. I need to ask you before we leave something that will be very important to our viewers, all prospective writers. Do you need an agent to get your script read, and how do you find a reliable agent? What do you do when you're just starting?
Okay, you use the word script. Your manuscript or your script, you need an agent. I was going to try to find a way to say it nicely.
Okay.
You need an agent. These people, producers, publishers, are just inundated with manuscripts over the transom, supposedly. Very many of them won't even look at it unless it's submitted by an agent. Some of them won't even look at it if they're submitted by agents that they don't respect. So we're at a point in time at which the best-selling book or high-profile books are what the publishers push. I think you must have an agent.
Well, how do you find a reliable agent? And this is my final question.
There's several ways. Some agents will look at unsolicited manuscripts. Normally, you send them a chapter and an outline, and you tell them, I've got the book finished, and I will send you the book if you want it. But even then, quite often they say no. I tend to think that the best way to do it is to become friendly with a published author, attend a workshop or whatever they're doing.
A person-to-person thing.
And do it person-to-person. I've done that for a number of people quite gladly, including Sarah Paretsky, who was a
Oh,
student
I
in the class.
enjoy her stories.
Is a student in one of my classes, but quite a few others. And I send them not only to my agent, but if I think another agent, you know, will handle them,
would be happy to
I've done
have
that
it.
too. But I won't make a recommendation without reading what they've written, and I won't send them to my agent or any agent if I don't think it's worth doing.
Right. Well, we're going to have to stop. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today, and we could talk another half an hour or more. But this has been Writer to Writer from FSCJ in Jacksonville.